how we can identify long-term companies, and what are the drivers which are required to identify, right? We'll discuss about the long-term growth drivers of a stock. Parameters to be considered, or what kind of a categories we need to focus to ensure we are there in the long-term focused investment, right? So first of all, when we discuss, we need to focus on the main key fundamental drivers which leads stock to gain multi-bagger returns or to compound. And yes, regarding fundamental drivers, sales is something very important we need to focus upon, which will help the stock to further increase. A consistent growth in revenues is important, right? Margins, yes, margins, apart from the increase in sales, the expenses also should be at check, and any business wing which is under losing, we should reduce or get rid of that losing operations, right? The company where we have been invested should not focus more on the losing operations, right? So that the margins will be intact. Earnings wise, yes, we need to see a growth in earnings per share. As a stock market investor, I want my money, whatever I've invested, to grow, right? And EPS, earnings per share, will signify that, right? And all these drivers, we will be able to see it in the screener, and we can assess the quarter on quarter growth. Now, the most important part, what we will also be focusing on is, what are the company categories we should be broadly looking at, right? Because in stock market, we have a lot of categories, right? A lot of categories we have in stock market. But what kind of a companies we need to focus? One, institutional favorites, right? Wherever there is big money coming into the stock, right? Be it domestic investors or institutional investors, we need to focus on those companies, right? Cyclicality is one category wherein for couple of days or weeks or months, you see an uptrend, and again it will have a downtrend. So it will be like a crest and a trough, right? So every cyclical business will involve these kind of movements, right? So this is called as crest, and this is called as trough, right? The lower and the higher part. For example, in the cyclical businesses, if you see steel, right? Steel is one sector which will come under cyclical, and right now if you see, the sectoral tailwinds is regarding the steel related companies, right? Maybe if you look at Venus Pipes, right? Maybe one of the company, because of the sectoral tailwinds, price volume, it is on the verge of breakout, right? So even if you look at your sugar related businesses, a cyclicality business, right? If you look at your cement industry, cyclical, right? Fertilizer space, cyclical. If it's a good monsoon season, you see a good growth in fertilizer companies also, right? So cyclicality is one. Turnaround situations. So any company wherein the quarterly sales performance has been down, and right in the last one quarter or in the last 2 quarters, there is a good growth of earnings. These can be turnaround situations, and the chances are very high. Either they can give an extraordinary return, or we need to play cautiously, because it can again lead into further decline, right? KOCIL is one of the company which is like a turnaround situation now, right? Market leaders, I want every one of you, any sector you are focusing, sir, I'm studying on X sector, I'm studying on Y sector, you have to have a list of leaders in that sector. If I ask you automobile, Maruti should be your first name, right? If I ask you about banking, maybe you should be getting your ICICI, you should be getting your HDFC, you should be getting your SBI, right? The market leaders in that segment. Even if you say Maruti, right? Do not go with the price of the stock, right? There is something called as price anchoring, wherein majority of the investors, sir, the stock is 5,000 rupees, the stock is 11,000 rupees. right? So that's why I don't invest into those stocks. I want 150 rupees. I want 200. I want below 100. Please understand that is called as price anchoring, right? The stock price will not decide anything about the future movement or your profit levels. A stock which is 10,000 rupees, if it is appreciating by 10%, yes, it will move to 11,000. A stock which is 100 rupees, if it is appreciating by 10%, it will move to 110, right? So that if a company is good, qualitatively good, technically looking stronger, if you have only, let's say, X amount of rupees, let's say, sir, I have only 50,000 rupees, and the stock which I feel is good is 10,000 rupees. What to do? Just buy five shares. That's it, right? Just buy 5 shares. Okay. So the price anchoring should not be there. And the top competitors, market leaders are there. With respect to the market leader, who is the competitor, right? Who is the competitor? So if you look at wires and cables, right? Maybe if I'm looking at a Polycab India, which is slowly now rising and at the breakout levels, apart from Polycab, KA Industries is one company. Maybe it will come as a competitor, right? Your Havells India will come as a competitor, right? You have to have a list of competitors. Leaders and laggards. For me, leaders are those stocks which will be growing in price and volume. Laggards are one we need to avoid them as early as possible, right? As early as possible. Okay. So now let me show you some of the salient features about the each category we have discussed now, right? Now, institutional favorites are those companies where institutions prefer quality leaders. Right now, if you see, yes, maybe on the institutional investors, FII are right now slowly entering into the market now. Not great 3-4 months before, like that. It's not so great. Majority domestic institutions are entering. But if the FIIs need to enter, their first focus would be to entering into quality leaders, right? And even large cap companies they prefer. And yes, it gives a very good reason for us to focus now on large caps as well. Because in the last 1.5 year, when we have 3 categories, large cap, small, mid cap, and small cap, large cap is one sector which did not appreciate as high like your mid cap and small cap, right? So yes, when FIAs are entering, their first entry would be into large cap stocks. Second, liquidity should be there, right? Liquidity should be there. The reason I always say any small cap or even a penny cap stock, yes, you can invest if there is potential, but do not be overboarded in that stock. Because if you want institutions to ride that stock for a very longer period, they should have sufficient liquidity in that stock. Means there should be sellers and buyers, or the free float shares, right? Should be more, so that if an institution wants to buy in bulk 1 lakh, 2 lakh shares, that kind of a liquidity should be there, right? So institutions prefer liquid stocks, and these are some of the companies which are most widely followed, right? Most widely followed. Fourth, markets. At times where people ask me, sir, the markets are down now, right? Or market is collapsing, or markets are at a very high level. If there is a 5%, 10% correction, what should be my action pointers? Always I would say, when there is a correction in the market, use this as an opportunity to identify those companies which are staying strong, right? Which are staying strong. So bear markets provide good opportunities to identify stronger companies during a bull market, right? And lastly, it should be a company where the share price also should increase, right? So people tell me, sir, this is a good company, but still the share is falling. What to do, right? If a company share price is not increasing, it cannot be a good company, right? It can, personally, you may love that company or you have been working in that company. Until and unless the stock price is not increasing or not moving, do not term it as a good company for at least investment purpose, right? For at least investment purpose. Okay. So yes, quality leaders are one which they pick up. Then official growth stock, right? What do you mean by, sir, beware of official growth stock? What do you mean by that, right? So quality leaders means any company which is fundamentally and technically stronger, right? Fundamentally also quarter on quarter there is a good growth in sales, earnings, and net profit, or even margins, right? These are some of the quality companies, right? Official growth stocks means, yes, on the price wise they may increase, but if the fundamentals there is a problem, or the sales wise it is declining, or the net profits are declining, or all are good but the margins are continuously declining, so we have to be very cautious on that. So they are like growth stocks but not quality leaders. Okay. Cyclical, yes, we have discussed about various cyclical related companies, be it your steel related, right, your Venus pipes, your fertilizer related, sugar related, right? All of these companies comes under cyclical, and depending upon the season, right? So companies that sell discretionary items during a booming economy, right? And during a recession, these are some of the companies which may decline, right? So identifying the cyclicality is also important, and in which cycle you are entering is more important, right? And majority of the steel related companies are right now in as a sectoral tailwind, it is moving, right? As a sectoral tailwind, it is moving, right? Now let's study about turnaround situations, right? So this is something only a moderate or an aggressive investor can try. The reason being, turnaround scenarios are where either the stock can literally move or they can further decline, right? Let's say a new CEO is coming into the business, a new managing director is coming into the business to revive. One of the example, South Indian Bank, right? Couple of months or couple of quarters, if you look, the new MD has literally changed the direction of the company, right? So that can be a make or break for the stock, right? Make or break for the stock, right? Similarly, fundamentals wise recovering, right? Go back and check KOCIL, right? I want you to check on the technicals and the fundamental aspect. How is the growth in quarter on quarter numbers, right? Numbers. And if the company is coming out completely with a new focused strategy, right? Completely reviving everything, wanted to change the entire structure of the management, right? Or even a company which is in NPAs, non-performing assets, right? Which is in the strategic asset allocation, right? Those are the companies which can be a turnaround, right? Improvement in margins, yes. Compared to 2-3 quarters before, now the margins have been better, right? And once it was doing bad, and then recovery is slowly starting, right? So these are some of the scenario which should be explored very cautiously, and most importantly, do not overtrade in these stocks. You have to start with a smaller position, all the turnaround companies, and as it is moving in your direction, you need to add in tranches. Because my intention for all of you is, when you are winning, make it big. When you are losing, cut short your losses ASAP, as soon as possible, right? So you should not be losing in a big manner. A stock which is declining by 20% or even 25%, you need almost 33 to 40% to just cover your losses, right? A stock falling by 25%, right? You need literally 40% to move up to just come to break even when it recovers, right? So losses works against us, right? Losses works against us. And then market leader, any sector which has a strong presence and it emerges as a leader, right? So those are the first companies which will start moving during a bull market. And yes, we do not have too many companies. We have a handful of companies, right? A handful of companies. So we need to keep a track of them. And market leader wise, yes, if you see regarding the soda related businesses, right? Maybe your Coke, your Pepsi, these are the companies you can recollect. And if you ask me about your third, fourth, and fifth company, it's very difficult to remember also, right? So market leaders will always be those companies which are like long-term businesses. And we are discussing about the growth drivers for long-term companies, right? And any company which should be as a market leader should have high sales, increasing sales, good margins, earnings per share improving, and it should be a strong relative strength, right? Which means, sir, this is a market leader. But with respect to the Nifty 50, it's not stronger. Relative strength wise, it is negative. I'll give you a very solid example, right? HDFC Bank, yes, good sales in good increase in sales, right? Margins wise, yes. Earnings per share, yes. But relative strength wise, it has been underperforming Nifty 50, right? It has been underperforming Nifty 50. So instead of being, because of market leader, we have to also look whether it is stronger than Nifty 50, right? In the same example, yes, ICICI Bank is little better. SBI is wonderful, good growth in sales, margins, EPS. Relative strength wise also, it is above Nifty 50, right? Relative strength wise also, it is above Nifty 50. And most importantly, today, whoever are tracking the market, HDFC Bank has investor meeting today, right? So let's see what will be the verdict there, right? So if it is like as per the expectations of the investors meeting, right? So it can either be a gap up or it can be a gap down, right? We have to be cautious. So the main learning here is to be a market leader, it should have that qualitative features as well, right? Qualitative features as well. And next, coming to competitors. What are the next best competitors, right? So what are the number 2 and number 3? If you have been following our live sessions or if you have been attending our live sessions, right? So we have always been discussing, maybe if you are looking on the cables or wires related, KA Industries is also an immediate competitor, trying to be number 1 or being number 2. And yes, has been doing wonderfully well on a weekly time frames, right? And it just needs certain triggers for these companies to emerge as market leader, right? And if you look together, right, as a group, they all move ahead, right? They all move ahead. And the only difference between a market leader and the next competitor is they lag in few details, right? Maybe on the performance wise, maybe on the fundamentals wise, just few details they lag. But apart from that, you need to have 1 or 2 leaders and what are their immediate competitors, right? 1 or 2. So you will be tracking in a sector 3 to 4 companies, which can be a part of our long-term growth story, right? Long-term growth story. And lastly, differentiation between leaders and laggards, right? If I want something to be in a leader, right, those should be having a growth in terms of its increase in revenue and earnings per share. It should have a good dominating market position. And yes, trend should continue for a longer term, right? And when I said trend, for you to understand better, technically, it should exhibit 45-degree chart on weekly or monthly, right? When you look at a company which you wanted to be a best candidate, right, on a weekly or a monthly scale, if you see, a stock should be moved in this direction, right? So if you look here, so it is almost 45-degree, right? 45-degree. So a stock which is showing this kind of a pattern on a weekly or a monthly time frame are the good long-term companies. And yes, the trend is positive for a long term. And business models which are scalable in nature, right? Yes, if you see a business where over next 3 years, 5 years, with the increase in number of customers or a new acquisition of customers, if you can see a further growth, those businesses are called as scalable businesses for a long term. The worst candidates or something we should not be there are companies where they are eroding their industry positions, limited pricing power. They cannot increase their prices beyond a particular level, right? Heavily regulated. Government can impose heavy duties on it, right? Uh, Environmental board can come and suddenly give some threat, right? Pollution board, right? And because of these regulatory issues, pricing power issue, right? If their margins are limited or they have a pressure on margins, those are the candidates we do not overboard on that, right? Those can be a laggards, right? So if you look closer, when we have a keen idea about the fundamental drivers of a company and what are the various categories and which kind of a category we should not be like having huge exposures for long term. Maybe I prefer not to have huge exposures into cyclical companies for long term investment. Maybe short term, less than 1 year, couple of weeks, couple of months, I can trade them, right? Turnaround situations. Immediately for long term, no. I'll assess them for a couple of quarters. It can be 4, it can be up to 6 quarters also, right? 1.5 year, I'll be observing. Whenever they decline, I quickly get out of it, right? But if they are institutional favorites, where there is new FII, DIA money coming, right? Where they are like a good market leader, company like Maruti, company like Titan, a Varun Beverages Limited, right? A Trent Limited. All these companies, I just keep accumulating for long term because they are market leaders in their particular domain, right? And even competitors, I keep a check what is happening in the competitors. Are they attempting to good? And yes, competitors, you need to do a little bit more work because when they come as number one positions, chances are high for them to literally blow from the present prices to a very high prices. And yes, having a differentiation between leaders and laggards will help us to win big in leader and cut short as early as possible if it is a laggard, right? So I hope everyone loved this discussion, and I want you to type below which companies, just name 3 companies below which you feel are leaders for the next 3 years.